Rain lashed against the windows of Mercer's rare books, creating rivulets that distorted the view of the empty street outside. Elliot Mercer moved between the shelves with practiced ease, his fingers tracing leather spines as he hummed softly to himself. At 52, his once dark hair had faded to salt and pepper, and fine lines framed his gray eyes, eyes that had seen much love and loss. Another quiet evening, he murmured to the ancient tabby cat perched on the checkout counter. Keats, named for the poet, merely blinked in agreement. 3 years had passed since David's death. 3 years of running the bookstore alone, teaching occasional literature seminars at the university, and pretending the emptiness in his chest was just a natural part of aging. The bookstore, with its labyrinth of shelves and the scent of paper and binding glue, had become both his refuge and his prison. The bell above the door jangled, startling both man and cat. Few customers ventured out during storms like this, especially so close to closing time. She stood dripping on the welcome mat, a slender figure in a rain-soaked hoodie. As she lowered her hood, Elliot tried not to stare at her lavender skin, a shade of purple that marked her immediately as one of the refugee aliens who had arrived on Earth 5 years ago following the destruction of their homeworld. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice melodic with an accent Elliot couldn't quite place. "I know you're closing soon, but may I wait out the storm? The bus won't come for another hour." Elliot cleared his throat. "Of course. Please, come in properly. You're soaked through, thank you." She stepped further inside, water pooling beneath her boots. "Most shops turned me away. I appreciate the kindness." Something in her resigned tone made Elliot's chest tighten. "I have a kettle in the back. Tea might help warm you up." The alien woman smiled, revealing teeth just slightly too white and perfect to be human. "That would be wonderful. I'm Lyra, by the way. Lyra Vex. Elliot Mercer. The grumpy cat is Keats." In the small back office, Elliot busied himself with the electric kettle while Lyra removed her wet coat. Her simple clothing, jeans, and a long-sleeved shirt seemed deliberately chosen to appear as human as possible. Though nothing could disguise the purple hue of her skin or the slight shimmer that seemed to emanate from it when she moved. "Earl Grey or chamomile?" he asked, surprising himself with the desire to make conversation. "Chamomile, please. It reminds me of a flower from my home." The silence between them, as the tea steeped, wasn't uncomfortable. Elliot found himself studying her hands wrapped around the mug, elegant, with long fingers perfectly normal except for their color and a subtle pattern of slightly raised markings along the backs. So he ventured, "Are you a reader?" Lyra's eyes, a deeper purple than her skin, with flecks of silver instead of pupils, lit up. "Books are my salvation on this planet. I was a linguistic scholar before," she trailed off, sipping her tea. "Before everything changed, what languages do you study?" "I've mastered 7 Earth languages so far, plus my native 3. I'm particularly fascinated by how your poetry translates across cultural boundaries." Elliot leaned forward, his own specialty suddenly relevant. "I teach comparative literature at the university. Or, I did, before focusing on the bookstore. This place is yours?" Lyra looked around with newfound appreciation. "It feels... alive. Like the books are breathing." Something shifted in Elliot's chest, a door long closed, creaking slightly open. "Would you like to see my favorites? I have a collection of poetry translations that might interest you. For the next 2 hours?" As rain hammered against the roof, Elliot and Lyra sat cross-legged on the floor between shelves. Books opened between them, reading passages aloud and debating interpretations. Lyra's insights into Rilke made Elliot see the familiar verses anew, while her delight at discovering Emily Dickinson was almost childlike. When the storm finally abated, Elliot found himself reluctant to end their conversation. "The bus should be running now," he said, glancing at the clock. Lyra gathered her now dry coat, hesitating at the door. "Thank you for the shelter. And the conversation. Both have been rare gifts since I arrived here." Elliot thought of his empty apartment above the store, of another evening alone with memories and regrets. Before he could reconsider, he said, "The shop opens at 10 tomorrow. If you're free, I could use help cataloging a new collection. Paid work, of course." I would like that very much, Lyra replied, her smile transforming her face into something Elliot could only describe as beautiful. Too many have turned me away, but you... I won't turn you away, Elliot said softly, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. Everyone deserves a safe harbor in the storm. As the bell jingled with her departure, Elliot found himself standing in the doorway long after she'd vanished from sight. For the first time in 3 years, the bookstore felt not just like a monument to his past, but possibly, just possibly, the beginning of something new. Three weeks had passed since Lyra first stepped into Mercer's rare books, and the shop had subtly transformed with her presence. New hand-lettered signs appeared on shelves, categorizing books not just by genre but by emotionally resonance, for rainy day contemplation or when courage seems distant. The dusty display window now featured an artful arrangement of poetry collections alongside pressed flowers Lyra collected on her morning walks. Elliot watched her from behind the counter as she helped an elderly customer find a birthday gift for his granddaughter. Her lavender hands gestured expressively as she described the plot of a fantasy novel, her natural enthusiasm drawing a smile from the man who had initially stiffened at the sight of her alien features. "She's quite the saleswoman," remarked Harriet Wilson, a university colleague who had stopped by with coffee. "Your revenue must be up." 20%, Elliot admitted, accepting the cup. "But it's more than that. She sees stories differently, connects with readers in a way I never could." Harriet raised an eyebrow. "And how are you connecting with her exactly?" Elliot felt warmth creep into his cheeks. "It's not like that. She needed work, I needed help." Ma'am Harriet sipped her coffee, unconvinced. "Just be careful, Elliot. Hawthorne isn't exactly known for its progressive attitudes, especially about the refugees," as if summoned by this observation. The bell above the door announced the arrival of Mayor Griffith and his wife. Elliot straightened, instantly alert. The mayor's anti-refugee rhetoric had intensified with upcoming elections. "Professor Mercer," the mayor nodded curtly. "We missed you at the town council meeting last night." "Inventory night," Elliot replied, watching as Mrs. Griffith's gaze landed on Lyra with poorly disguised distaste. "I wasn't aware you'd hired one of them," the mayor said quietly. "Ms. Vex is my assistant manager," Elliot replied, his voice firm, "and an accomplished linguist." The mayor's smile tightened. "Well, just remember the new registration requirements take effect next month. All employers of non-terrestrials must file the appropriate paperwork." After they left without making a purchase, Harriet squeezed Elliot's arm. "Like I said, be careful." Later that evening, after closing, Elliot and Lyra sat in their usual spots, him in the worn leather armchair by the window, her cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by books selected for tomorrow's display. "The mayor doesn't like me," Lyra stated matter-of-factly, not looking up from her work. "The mayor is an idiot," Elliot retorted, making Liralafa sound like wind chimes that never failed to lighten his mood. "On my planet, we had a saying, 'Those who fear difference have the most to learn from it.'" Lyra's fingers traced the embossed title of a poetry book. "But learning requires willingness. Are you willing to tell me more?" Elliot asked quietly. "About your home?" Lyra was silent for so long, Elliot thought she might refuse. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a depth of longing that made his chest ache. It was beautiful crystal forest that sang when the 3 moons rose. Cities built within ancient trees, taller than your skyscrapers. My family were keepers of stories. We preserved histories, languages, poems. She paused, her purple fingers clenching slightly. When the atmospheric degradation began, many denied the evidence. By the time everyone acknowledged the truth, we had mere months to evacuate. Only about 30,000 of us managed to leave before the final collapse. "I'm so sorry," Elliot whispered. Lyra looked up, her silver-flecked eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "What about you? You never speak of your husband, but his photographs are everywhere in your office." "Ah!" Elliot's breath caught. He hadn't realized she'd noticed those private mementos. David died of pancreatic cancer 3 years ago. It was quick diagnosis to death in 8 months. The familiar pain washed through him, but somehow less sharply than before. We owned this shop together. He handled the people, I handled the books. You miss him. Every day. Lyra rose fluidly and crossed to his chair, kneeling beside it. Without warning, she took his hand in hers, turning it palm up. With one finger, she traced a pattern across his skin, a flowing symbol he didn't recognize. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice strangely hoarse. "On my world, this is how we honor both the departed and those who carry their memory," she explained softly. "It means to love completely is never a loss." Even when parted, something shifted between them in that moment. An acknowledgement of shared understanding that transcended their different origins. Elliot felt tears prick his eyes as Lyra's cool fingers continued, her gentle mapping of his palm. The peaceful moment shattered with the crash of breaking glass. They both jumped up as a brick landed among the books, wrapped in paper, secured by a rubber band. Elliot rushed to the window to see shadows disappearing around the corner. Lyra carefully unwrapped the paper from the brick. Her face remained expressionless as she handed it to Elliot. "Go home, alien" was scrawled in red marker, alongside a crude drawing of a spaceship. "Perhaps I should resign," Lyra said quietly. "Your business shouldn't suffer because of me." Elliot crumpled the paper, anger burning through his veins. This shop survived 2 world wars, the Great Depression and Amazon. It can survive small-minded bigots. He reached for her hand, surprising himself with the boldness of the gesture. "I won't let them drive you away." Their eyes met, and Elliot saw something flicker in Lyra's gaze, a vulnerable hope that mirrored his own awakening feelings. Standing amid broken glass and scattered books, their hands linked, Elliot realized he was no longer merely existing in the aftermath of loss. For the first time in 3 years, he was beginning to live again. Rain returned to Hawthorne on the night of the town hall meeting, a steady, soaking downpour that seemed determined to wash away the coming autumn. Elliot adjusted his tie nervously as he and Lyra hurried from his car to the municipal building, sharing an umbrella that did little to keep them dry. "You don't have to do this," Lyra said for the 3rd time that evening. "Speaking against the registration proposal could affect your standing in the community." "My standing?" Elliot snorted. "I'm already the eccentric bookshop owner who talks to his cat and refuses to sell bestsellers. This won't change much." Inside, the meeting room was packed despite the weather. Mayor Griffith stood at the podium, outlining his proposed non-terrestrial monitoring act, with bureaucratic language that barely concealed its discriminatory intent. The new law would require all aliens to register their movements, restrict them from certain areas of town, and impose a curfew for community safety. Elliot felt Lyra tense beside him as whispers and stares followed their entrance. He guided her 2 seats near the back, his hand resting protectively against her lower back. When the floor opened for public comments, Elliot found himself standing before he'd fully decided to speak. Walking to the microphone, he felt the weight of the room's attention. "My name is Elliot Mercer. I've owned Mercer's Rare Books for 15 years and taught at Hawthorne University for 20. His voice strengthened as he continued. "This proposal is not just legally questionable, but morally reprehensible. The refugees from Proxima Centauri lost their entire world. They came here seeking sanctuary, bringing valuable skills, knowledge, and perspective." From the corner of his eye, he saw Lyra watching him, her expression a mixture of gratitude and concern. "In my shop, Ms. Vex has increased business by 20%. Her knowledge of languages and literature exceeds most doctoral candidates I've taught. Yet this law would prevent her from working evening events and restrict her ability to travel freely," Mayor Griffith interrupted. "This isn't about individual cases, Professor. It's about community safety." "Safety from what, exactly?" Elliot challenged. "In the 5 years since the refugees arrived, crime rates in Hawthorne have actually decreased. The only incident at my shop was a brick through the window thrown by humans, not aliens." Murmur ran through the crowd. Not everyone, Elliot realized, had been aware of the vandalism. "Before we vote on this measure," he concluded, "I ask each of you to consider what kind of community we want to be, one that turns away those in need, or one that recognizes our common humanity regardless of appearance or origin." As he returned to his seat, Lyra's fingers briefly brushed his in a gesture of thanks that sent warmth spreading through his chest. Later that night, long after the contentious meeting had ended with the vote postponed for further consideration, Elliot and Lyra sat in the bookshop's back room. Rain continued its steady rhythm against the windows as they shared a bottle of wine in the relief of temporary reprieve. "Your speech was beautiful," Lyra said softly, "though I notice you spoke of our common humanity." "I'm not human, Elliot." "Technically, no," he smiled, feeling the wine's pleasant warmth. "But humanity at its best is about more than biology. It's about compassion, intelligence, creativity, all qualities you possess in abundance." "On my world, we had no concept of alien," she mused. "Our word for different species translates roughly to other brother, Elliot repeated, liking the sound. "That's lovely." "Elliot," Lyra set down her wine glass, suddenly serious. "There's something I need to tell you," his heart constricted with sudden anxiety. "What is it?" "The immigration officials visited my apartment yesterday. With the new federal regulations, they're reviewing all refugee statuses. My linguistics work is not considered essential expertise under the new guidelines." "What does that mean exactly?" Elliot asked, though he feared he already knew. "It means I may be relocated to the containment facility in Nevada while they process deportation." "Deportation? To where your planet is uninhabitable?" "There's a colony on Mars. Conditions are difficult there." Elliot set his glass down with more force than intended. "This is absurd. You have employment, community ties?" "I'll speak to Congressman Williams. He owes me a favor. And Professor Namari in the law school can help with your case." "Why would you do all this for me?" Lyra asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The question hung between them. Demanding an honesty Elliot had avoided acknowledging even to himself. He moved from his chair to sit beside her on the small sofa, because the thought of you leaving... Its voice faltered. "Because these past weeks, you've brought life back to this shop." "To me?" Lyra's gaze held his, her alien eyes reflecting emotions entirely recognizable. "I have watched you mourning your husband while still honoring his memory. Your capacity for love humbles me." "I never expected to feel this way again," Elliot admitted. "It's terrifying." "On my world," Lyra said softly, "we believe souls recognize each other across lifetimes, across species, across galaxies. Perhaps that's what happened when I walked into your shop that rainy night." Elliot reached up, hesitating only briefly before touching her cheek. Her skin was cooler than a human's, with a subtle texture like velvet. "Too many have turned you away," he whispered, echoing her words from weeks ago. "But I won't let you go." The kiss that followed was gentle, exploratory, a crossing of boundaries between worlds. Lyra's lips tasted faintly of cinnamon, and something utterly alien yet perfectly right. As the rain drummed steadily outside, Elliot pulled her closer. Feeling the strangeness of her form, the too light weight, the subtle differences in structure all dissolving into irrelevance, as their embrace deepened. In the dim light of the back room, surrounded by the books they both loved, Elliot and Lyra discovered a language beyond words, communion of touch and tenderness that required no translation. And for the first time since losing David, Elliot felt not just the sharp pain of grief's memory, but the expansive possibility. The first snow of winter dusted Hawthorne like powdered sugar, transforming the town into a scene from a holiday card. Inside Mercer's rare books, warmth emanated from the newly installed wood stove that crackled merrily in the corner. Elliot arranged a display of winter-themed classics while Keats the cat batted lazily at a dangling ornament. "I still don't understand why humans associate snow with celebration," Lyra remarked. Emerging from the stockroom with a box of holiday cards, "On my world, cold was something to be feared," says the woman who spent an hour making snow angels yesterday, Elliot teased, earning a lilac blush from Lyra. 3 months had passed since the town hall meeting. Through Elliot's connections and a surprising groundswell of community support, Lyra had received a temporary stay on her deportation case. She had moved into Elliot's apartment above the bookstore, initially for practicality, they told themselves. Though both recognized the arrangement for what it truly was, a commitment neither had. Expected to find, the bell above the door jingled. and Elliot looked up to see his sister Catherine enter with her husband and teenage daughter. "Surprise," Catherine called out, unwinding her scarf. "We finished Christmas shopping in Portland early and thought we'd stop by on our way home." "Aunt Catherine?" Elliot embraced his sister warmly before shaking hands with her husband. Mark, their daughter Zoe, was already wandering among the shelves, her attention captured by the books rather than the adults. "And you must be Lyra," Catherine said, turning to the purple-skinned woman with unconcealed curiosity. "Elliot's told us so much about you. It's all exaggerations, I'm sure." Lyra replied with a gracious nod. "It's wonderful to finally meet Elliot's family. We brought lunch," Mark announced, holding up insulated bags. "Thought we could all eat upstairs and get acquainted properly, upstairs in the apartment." Lyra moved easily through the kitchen she now shared with Elliot, setting the table while he helped Mark unpack containers of Thai food. Catherine watched their synchronized movements with the assessing eye of a protective sister. "So," Catherine said, when they were all seated, "Elliot tells us you were a linguistic scholar on your world." "Yes," Lyra answered, her fork pausing halfway to her mouth. "I specialized in preservation of indigenous dialects. Much of my work was documenting languages spoken by fewer than 1,000 people." "That's actually really cool," Zoe piped up, breaking her teenage silence. "We're studying endangered languages in my anthropology class. Perhaps I could share some materials with you," Lyra offered. "I've been transcribing memories of my world's languages. It helps me feel connected to what was lost." "I'd like that," Zoe said, surprisingly earnest. As lunch progressed, the initial awkwardness faded. Mark and Lyra discovered a shared interest in classical music, while Catherine's reserve thawed when Lyra admired the handmade bracelet she wore crafted. It turned out by Catherine herself. Later, when Lyra and Zoe went downstairs to find the promised language materials, Catherine cornered Elliot in the kitchen. "She's not what I expected," she admitted, helping him load the dishwasher. "What did you expect?" Elliot asked, keeping his tone light, though tension hummed beneath. "I don't know. Someone more... ... She waved her hand vaguely. "Alien, I guess." Elliot laughed softly. "She is alien, Kath. Her biochemistry, her culture, her perspective, all completely different from ours, yet somehow also fundamentally similar in all the ways that matter." Catherine studied her brother's face. "You love her?" It wasn't a question, but Elliot answered anyway. "Yes. I didn't think it was possible after David, but yes." "And does she love you?" "In her way?" Elliot closed the dishwasher, choosing his words carefully. "Her people express emotions differently than we do. They believe love is demonstrated through actions rather than declarations. The fact that she's fighting to stay here, that she's learning human customs and building a life with me, that's her way of saying it." Catherine leaned against the counter. Mom and Dad would have had a fit. Probably, Elliot agreed, remembering their parents' rigid traditionalism. "But they're not here, and I'm happier than I've been in years." "Then I'm happy for you," Catherine said simply, embracing her brother. "But fair warning, Mark's going to ask a million inappropriate questions about alien biology at dinner." That night, after Catherine's family had departed with promises to return for the holidays, Elliot and Lyra lay in bed, the room illuminated only by moonlight reflecting off the fresh snow outside. "Your family is kind," Lyra murmured, her head resting on Elliot's chest. "Even Catherine, who wanted to dislike me." "They were surprised by you," Elliot said, his fingers tracing the intricate patterns that naturally occurred on Lyra's shoulders, swirling markings that reminded him of constellations. "I think they expected someone more... purple," Lyra suggested with a laugh. "Different," Elliot corrected, kissing her forehead. "They didn't expect to recognize themselves in you," Lyra shifted, propping herself up to look at him. In the moonlight, her alien features, the slightly elongated eyes, the too-perfect symmetry of her face, seemed both otherworldly and utterly beloved to Elliot. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, an echo of that night months ago when she'd revealed her deportation threat. "Something about my people that you should know." Elliot felt a flicker of anxiety. "What is it?" "On my world, when we choose a life partner, the bond is considered unbreakable. Not just emotionally, but physically. Our biochemistry actually changes, attuning to our chosen one. Like monogamous animals that mate for life? Similar, but more profound. Our lifespans synchronize. Our sensory experiences align. She hesitated. It's already beginning with me. I can sense your emotions now, especially when we're intimate. I feel your joy, your occasional sadness when you remember David. Elliot absorbed this revelation, both awed and humbled. Is it dangerous for you to bond with a different species? Unknown, Lyra admitted. There are no precedents, but I need you to understand what it means if we continue. My body, my life, is choosing you in ways beyond human understanding of commitment. Elliot cupped her face in his hands. Are you asking if that scares me? Perhaps what scares me, he said softly, is the thought of the alternative, of not having found you, of continuing to exist rather than truly living. He drew her closer. I choose you too, Lyra, however your biology works, however long we have to choose you. Their lovemaking that night held a new dimension, a conscious awareness of their profound differences and the miracle of their connection despite them. Elliot explored the subtle variations of Lyra's form with reverent attention, the slight coolness of her skin, the faint luminescence it emitted when she was aroused, the unusually sensitive areas along her spine that made her gasp when touched. For her part, Lyra showed Elliot intimacy as practiced on her world techniques that focused on sustained eye contact and synchronized breathing, creating a sense of merging consciousness that enhanced physical pleasure in ways he'd never imagined possible. Together, they created a new language of desire, neither fully human nor fully alien, but uniquely their own. Later, as Lyra drifted towards sleep in his arms, Elliot gazed at the snow falling outside their window and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, deportation threats, community prejudice, the fundamental uncertainty of loving someone from another world. Tonight they were simply two beings who had found harbor in each other's hearts. Spring arrived with unexpected swiftness, seeming to catch winter off guard. One day, hawthorn was gripped by frost. The next, crocuses pushed defiantly through the softening earth, and birdsong replaced the silence of snow. In the backyard behind Mercer's rare books, Elliot and Lyra had created a small garden. Today they worked side by side, Elliot turning soil while Lyra carefully transplanted seedlings she had started indoors weeks ago. These will produce flowers similar to those from my homeworld, she explained, her purple fingers delicately arranging the roots of a strange-looking plant. The seeds were among the few personal items I was allowed to bring. Elliot paused in his digging. Will they actually grow in earth soil? I've modified them slightly, Lyra said with the hint of a smile. Your university's biology department has been quite accommodating since Professor Chen invited me to lecture on xenobotany. The change in her status from refugee to visiting scholar had been an unexpected blessing, providing legal protection that had temporarily halted deportation proceedings. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it bought them time. The peaceful moment was interrupted by Harriet Wilson, who appeared at the garden gate with uncharacteristic agitation. Elliot, she called out, you need to see this. She thrust a tablet into his soil-covered hands. On the screen was an article from the Hawthorne Gazette with the headline, Mayor calls for immediate removal of non-terrestrials following incident. What incident? Elliot demanded, scanning the article. This is nonsense. It says there was an altercation at the farmer's market involving alien aggression, but gives no details. Jared Thompson's son had a seizure, Harriet explained. One of the Centaurian medical refugees tried to help. Apparently their touch can sometimes stabilize neurological functions. Mrs. Thompson panicked, started screaming about her son being attacked. The boy is fine, Lyra stated, her voice suddenly distant. I can check with my community. This feels ... orchestrated. It is, Harriet agreed grimly. There's a town council emergency session tonight. The mayor's pushing through the registration act while emotions are high. Elliot looked at Lyra, whose face had become a careful mask-can expression he recognized as her way of concealing distress. We'll be there, he promised Harriet, and we'll bring as many supporters as we can gather. After Harriet left, Lyra's composure cracked. This was inevitable, she said softly. Humans fear difference. It's biological as survival mechanism. Not all of us, Elliot insisted, taking her hands despite the garden soil. Look how many people in town have come to know you, to respect you. The book club members, the university students. Even Mrs. Finley, who used to cross the street to avoid Yush, brings you cookies now. Individual connections are not enough against systematic prejudice, Lyra countered. Her scholar's mind analyzing the situation clinically, even as her heart responded emotionally. I've seen how this progresses. First registration, then restriction, then removal. Then we'll fight it, Elliot declared. Every step of the way. That evening, the town hall was even more crowded than during the previous meeting. Mayor Griffith had strategically positioned the Thompson family near the front, their tearful faces a silent argument for his cause. What the mayor hadn't anticipated, however, was the diversity of the crowd. The entire book club, 12 women ranging in age from 25 to 80, sat together wearing buttons that read, "Readers Against Registration, Professor?" Chen had brought a contingent of university faculty and students. Even Reverend Michaels from the First Methodist Church was present with several congregation members. When Elliot's name was called to speak, he walked to the microphone with Lyra beside him. A murmur ran through the room at this breach of protocols. Totocol's citizen comments were meant to be individual, but Elliot ignored it. Mayor Griffith has presented what he calls an incident as justification for implementing a discriminatory policy. I'd like to offer a different perspective. He turned to Lyra, who stepped forward with grace despite the tension vibrating through her. My name's Lyra Vex, she said, her melodic voice carrying clearly through the hall. I am a linguistics scholar, a gardener, a bookseller, and yes, a refugee from a world that no longer exists. I stand before you not as an alien presence to be feared, but as a neighbor asking for the same consideration you would give any newcomer to your community. Her words seemed to cast a spell over the room. Even those who had arrived determined to support the Registration Act found themselves listening intently. I understand fear, she continued. When our scientists first detected the atmospheric degradation that would eventually destroy our planet, many of my people refused to believe it. Fear of change, of difference, of the unknown, these are not unique to humans. But neither is compassion, curiosity, or the capacity to grow beyond initial prejudice. She gestured toward Mrs. Finley in the audience. When I first arrived in Hawthorne, Mrs. Finley would not meet my eyes. Now she brings me cookies and tells me stories about her grandchildren. Mr. Rodriguez at the hardware store initially refused to serve me. Last week, he specially ordered garden tools designed for my hands. Professor Chen was skeptical of my knowledge until we spoke. Now we collaborate on research that benefits both our peoples. Lyra turned to face the Thompson family directly. What happened at the farmer's market was a misunderstanding born of good intentions. Healer Mav saw your son in distress and reacted according to our ways, without properly explaining. For that, our community is deeply sorry. We are learning your customs as you learn ours. This takes time and patience on both sides. Mrs. Thompson looked down, a complex emotion crossing her face that might have been shame. The proposed Registration Act, Lyra concluded, will not make understanding easier. It will create barriers where we need bridges. I ask you to consider not just what kind of town Hawthorne has been, but what kind of town it could become, one that turns away those who are different, or one that embraces the unique perspective each newcomer brings. When she finished, the silence was absolute. Then, from the back of the room, someone began to applaud. Others joined until the hall resonated with support. What followed was unprecedented in Hawthorne's municipal history. One by one, community members approached the microphone not with prepared statements, but with personal stories of interaction with the Centaurian refugees. Mrs. Finley spoke of how Lyra had helped her grandson discover a love of reading. Professor Chen detailed the medical advances being developed through collaboration. Even Jared Thompson, to everyone's surprise, stood to acknowledge that the alien healer had acted out of compassion, not aggression. By the time the meeting ended 3 hours later, Mayor Griffith's Registration Act had been not just postponed, but formally rejected by the council. replaced with a resolution to establish a cultural exchange program between human and Centaurian residents. Outside in the cool spring evening, Elliot wrapped his arm around Lyra's shoulders as they walked home through streets dappled with moonlight. "I never expected this outcome," Lyra admitted. "On my world, such conflicts rarely resolved peacefully." "Humans can surprise you," Elliot said, then corrected himself. "We can surprise ourselves. What happens now?" Lyra asked, practical even in victory. "Now," Elliot said, reaching into his pocket, "I ask you something I've been considering for months." He withdrew a small wooden box, hand-carved with intricate patterns that mimicked the markings on Lyra's skin. Opening it revealed to rings one a traditional band. The other, a delicate structure unlike any human jewelry, designed to accommodate the unique shape of Lyra's fingers. "On your world, biology creates your bonds," Elliot said softly. "On mine, we use symbols and promises. I thought perhaps we could honor both traditions." Lyra's eyes shimmered with silver-flecked emotion. "Are you asking me to marry you, Elliot Mercer? I'm asking you to continue what we've started, building something new together. Neither fully human nor fully Centaurian, but a bridge between worlds." He took her hand. "I'm asking you to make official what our hearts already know, that we belong to each other, regardless of origin or appearance or biology." "In my culture," Lyra said, her voice tender, "we have no ceremony for partnership because the bond itself is considered the sacred act. But I find I like your human traditions of public commitment." She extended her hand. "Yes, Elliot. I will marry you in your way, as I have already joined with you in mine." As he slipped the alien-designed ring onto her purple finger, Elliot felt the culmination of a journey that had begun on a rainy night nearly a year ago. From reluctant shelter to tentative friendship to profound love, their path had never been easy. But its challenges had created something stronger than either could have built alone. 1 year later, Mercer's rare books had expanded into the vacant storefront next door. The new space, called Stellar Perspectives, functioned as a cultural center where humans and Centaurians could share literature, art, and knowledge. Weekly language exchanges had become the town's most popular free event. While the garden behind the shop now bloomed with plants from both worlds, creating hybrid flowers of extraordinary beauty,